There is a question that has haunted human beings since the first moment we looked up at the night sky and felt something we could not name. Not wonder, not curiosity, something older than both. A cold, quiet suspicion that the universe does not know we are here, and worse, that it never will. This is not merely a feeling. It is a philosophical position, and it has been arrived at independently by some of the most penetrating minds in human history, from the darkest corridors of weird fiction to the sunlit cafes of post-war Paris. Each arrived at the edge of the same abyss. Each responded differently to what they found there. We are going to explore 4 of those responses today. Lovecraftian Cosmicism, Existentialism, Absurdism, and Nihilism, 4 philosophies born from the same wound, and 4 entirely different ways of surviving it. The wound: to understand any of these philosophies, we must first understand what provoked them. The ancient world had gods for everything. Thunder had a god. The sea had a god. Love had a god. The universe was not indifferent. It was crowded with intention, populated by divine personalities who quarreled, intervened, punished, and rewarded. Human beings were not insignificant. They were the audience for a cosmic drama performed entirely on their behalf. Then came Copernicus, who removed the Earth from the center of the universe. Then Darwin, who removed the divine origin of the human species. Then Freud, who removed the illusion of rational self-mastery. 3 blows, 3 dethronements. And in the aftermath of each, the same unbearable question surfaced with greater urgency. If we are not at the center of things, if we were not designed, if we cannot even trust our own minds, then what exactly are we? This is the wound, and it is from this wound that all 4 of these philosophies emerge. Lovecraftian Cosmicism, the horror of irrelevance. Howard Phillips Lovecraft looked into that wound and saw something most people preferred not to see. He saw that the universe was not merely indifferent to human life. It was so vast, so ancient, and so structurally alien to human comprehension that our existence within it was not even tragic. It was simply beside the point. Lovecraft called this philosophical position cosmicism. And unlike the thinkers we will encounter later, he did not soften the conclusion. He did not propose a solution. He proposed that there was no solution, only a more or less honest relationship with the horror of our situation. In the opening paragraph of The Call of Cthulhu, he wrote that the most merciful thing in the world is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents. That we live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and that it was not meant that we should voyage far. For Lovecraft, the universe was not a lawful cosmos presided over by a rational intelligence. It was a lawless chaos, ancient beyond calculation, populated by forces that did not notice us in the same way that a storm does not notice the ant it drowns. His fictional entities, the great old ones, Cthulhu, Azathoth, were not evil in any meaningful sense. They were simply so incomprehensibly vast, so structurally foreign to human values and human experience, that their relationship to us could only be described as accidental. We were not their prey. We were not their servants. We were not even their curiosity. We were in the way. Lovecraft described himself not as a pessimist, not as an optimist, but as a cosmic indifferentist. Things matter on the human scale, he acknowledged. But on the scale of the cosmos, we do not matter at all. He described humanity as miserable denizens of a wretched little flyspeck on the back door of a microscopic universe. This is a shattering position. But it is also, in a strange way, an honest one. Existential nihilism, the reality of meaninglessness where Lovecraft arrived at cosmic horror, the nihilist arrives at something quieter and in some ways more devastating. Not horror. Simply the recognition that meaning is not a feature of the universe. It is a feature of minds. And when minds are gone, meaning goes with them. Existential nihilism is the belief that human beings are without purpose, without significance, and unlikely to alter that condition in any fundamental way. It does not say that life feels meaningless. It says that life is meaningless not as a tragedy, but as a plain and unavoidable fact of existence. Friedrich Nietzsche was the first philosopher to seriously study and write about this position, and he was wise enough to recognize that it was not a resting place. The death of God, his famous proclamation, was not a celebration. It was a diagnosis. With the collapse of the religious framework that had given Western civilization its sense of cosmic purpose, a void had opened. And into that void, two very different responses were possible. The first Nietzsche called passive nihilism, the acceptance of meaninglessness as a reason to stop striving, to withdraw, to become numb, to allow the void to have the final word. The second he called active nihilism, and this was the path he demanded. Not acceptance of the void, but the use of it. The creation of new values from the ground up. Self-overcoming. The refusal to inherit meaning from any external source and the fierce, difficult, lonely task of forging it yourself. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, the figure who achieves this is portrayed not as a tragic hero, but as someone who laughs. Not from innocence, but from the full knowledge that there is nothing behind the curtain. And he laughs anyway, because he has decided that this is precisely the condition in which genuine greatness becomes possible. Absurdism, the revolt against the void. Albert Camus read the same diagnosis and arrived at a slightly different prescription. In the myth of Sisyphus, he identified what he called the absurd, the collision between the human need for meaning and the universe's absolute silence on the matter. The universe does not answer us. It never will. And yet we cannot stop asking. This gap between the question we cannot help but ask and the answer that will never come is the absurd. And Camus argued that it was not a problem to be solved. It was a condition to be lived. He proposed two false escapes. The first was physical suicide, the literal ending of one's life as a response to meaninglessness. The second was philosophical suicide, the surrender of one's reason to a ready-made belief system, whether religious or ideological, that offers the comfort of predetermined meaning at the cost of intellectual honesty. Camus rejected both. What he proposed instead was revolt. Not a political revolt, a philosophical one. The act of continuing to live, continuing to seek, continuing to build, in the full knowledge that no ultimate foundation exists beneath the structure you are building. He referred to the universe as a place of benign indifference. Not hostile, not threatening, simply and entirely unmoved by human longing. The image he returned to again and again was Sisyphus, condemned by the gods to roll a boulder up a hill for eternity, only to watch it roll back down, only to begin again. Camus looked at this image and said, one must imagine Sisyphus happy, not happy despite the futility, happy within it, because the struggle itself, the act of continuing in the face of the void, was its own form of defiance. And defiance, Camus believed, was the only authentic relationship a conscious being could have with an indifferent universe. Existentialism, the weight of freedom. Jean-Paul Sartre arrived at similar territory through a different door. His foundational claim was simple and devastating in equal measure. Existence precedes essence. In the religious worldview, human beings are created with a predetermined nature and purpose. Essence precedes existence. Sartre said the reverse was true. We exist first, without definition, without inherent purpose, without a predetermined self. And then, through every choice we make, every action we take, every relationship we enter, we create ourselves. This sounds liberating. In many ways it is. But Sartre was careful to describe the weight that comes with it. Because if there is no predetermined human nature, then there is no excuse. We cannot blame God. We cannot blame fate. We cannot blame our circumstances or our upbringing or our society in any final sense. We are, as he put it, condemned to be free. And that condemnation carries with it what he called anguish, the dizzying awareness that we are entirely responsible for who we become, in a universe that offers no guidance on the matter. The goal of atheistic existentialism is meaning-making in a world without inherent meaning, through the radical exercise of individual freedom. Not the freedom to do anything, but the freedom and the obligation to choose who you are knowingly, deliberately, and without the comfort of a map. For philosophies, one abyss. What is extraordinary about these four positions is how differently they respond to the same underlying reality. Lovecraft looks at the void and feels horror. He does not overcome it. He documents it with devastating precision and leaves the reader in the cold. Nihilism looks at the void and says, yes, and now what? Camus looks at it and says, revolt. Sartre looks at it and says, choose. Each is, in its own way, a form of honesty. Each refuses the consolation of inherited certainty. Each demands that the individual confront the actual conditions of existence rather than retreating into comfortable illusions. And yet they are not equal in what they offer. Lovecraft offers no way through. He maps the darkness with extraordinary precision and then leaves you there. Nihilism, in its passive form, does the same. It acknowledges the absence of meaning without pointing beyond it. But Nietzsche's active nihilism, Camus' absurdist revolt, and Sartre's radical freedom all contain within them something that Lovecraft's horror deliberately excludes, the possibility of a response. Because the void is not merely something that happens to us. It is something we are required to meet. And how we meet it, with paralysis or with revolt, with resignation or with creation, is perhaps the only truly human question. The Island of Ignorance. Lovecraft wrote that we live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity. He meant this as a warning, as a source of dread. But it is possible, and perhaps necessary, to look at the same image and see something else entirely. An island is not merely a place of exposure. It is a place of ground, a foundation, of the only kind of certainty that is available to finite beings in an infinite universe. The certainty of this moment, this consciousness, this irreducible fact of being here at all. The universe may not know we are here, but we know. And in the end, that may be enough to build something worth building. Not because the cosmos is watching, but because we are.